Hi guys, my name's Connor. I'm a science fiction, politics, and philosophy nerd, Marine Corps and law enforcement veteran, and I would argue a real Republican, meaning that I actually have Republican values from about a decade ago. We're going to be breaking down Christian nationalism with Andrew Wilson fighting a panel on the Piers Morgan show. So let's go ahead and get those people live on our channel. Let's make sure that we have some audio. That way you guys can actually hear it. That way, I'm not just talking to myself for 30 minutes like it's happened 2 or 3 times on my channel because I'm a boomer. Let's go.
We have to bring back religion to America because without borders, law and order, and religion, you really don't have a country anymore. We want religion brought back.
So the very foundation of the United States of America was indeed to be one nation under God. Nothing could have prepared me for the slew of attack against anyone who is a conservative Christian in America.
Right-wing Christianity in America has been suckered for a very long time into aligning with power and authority instead of challenging it as Christ did. Donald Trump,
true and based,
didn't get the love of evangelicals by promising to do a damn thing Jesus commanded of us. Right-wing Christianity does not fight for the things Jesus commanded and taught us to do.
We're not doing
the
persecuting doofus. So the thing is, it's so funny here. It's like even when we have full spectrum, when we have full spectrum dominance, Jesus called people vipers like you.
Dude, hit the other cheek. I can take it.
Nice. Nice. I'm gonna like this other guy. I'm gonna like this other guy for sure. H-Lock for $2 is like the stream and watch the VODs. True. The VODs need your love. Like the stream, share it with your friends, engage with chat, super chats if you got them, memberships if you got them. Also, watch the VODs, love the VODs, comment on the VODs.
The fatal attack on a Mormon church in Michigan this weekend was interpreted by some as more evidence of a very literal attack on Christianity and its values. Benny Johnson commented that Christianity is the most persecuted religion on earth and that it's time to get serious about it. It came just a week after Charlie Kirk's memorial, at which he was hailed as both a prophet and a martyr in a service infused with abundant biblical commentary. For some, all this points to an overdue revival of Christian values in a culture which has sought to eradicate them. But others are warning about a rise in so-called Christian nationalism, a hardline supremacist movement which uses faith as a fig leaf for uncompromising views, threatening to undermine the separation of church and state. We're going to debate this with 3 Christians, one a proud Christian nationalist, one a young moderate, and one who says conservatives have hijacked Christianity for their own malicious ends. This is
true.
Andrew Wilson, the host of The Crucible, John Fugelsang, author of Separation of Church and Hate, unpacking extremist politics, religion, and the urgent struggle for a compassionate America, and the host of The Isabel Brown Show on Daily Wire and a close friend of Charlie Kirk, Isabel Brown. Well, welcome to all 3 of you. Andrew Wilson, Donald Trump came out over the weekend and called this latest attack on the church in Michigan an attack on Christians in a post on his Truth Social platform. We don't actually know, as things stand, whether that was the motivation. We know that the suspect who died in all this was a former U.S. Marine, Thomas Jacob Sanford, and he had been pictured wearing a Trump T-shirt with the slogan, "Make liberals cry again," which may be an indication that he wasn't anti-Trump. We just don't know, as things stand, what his motivation was for this. As so often with these kind of incidents,
so someone is pointing out, Zara, the other guy isn't a Catholic. He said he was raised that way, but misquoted the Bible multiple times. He's a joke. Well, I'm going to have to see if I agree with your assessment. Uriel says, since when were Mormons considered Christian? Mormons believe in Jesus Christ. They're kind of like the Muslims in that they follow Sorry, I'm messing with my gun while I'm doing this. Don't worry. Don't worry, it's just a cosplay prop, YouTube. No big deal. But the like the Muslims, they're considered Abrahamic. So they think that Abraham was a prophet. They think that Moses was a prophet. They think that they probably don't think that Muhammad was a prophet. Let's be real. But Jesus was the Messiah. And then what happened was, like, Joseph Smith came to the United States and he found out a bunch of new lore about, the Bible, like Eden was in Jackson, Mississippi, and the promised land for the new Christian church, for the new Mormon church, was going to be in the Western United States, and that they were on like a new pilgrimage. They were on like a new 40 years in the desert in order to find the American promised land. So there's all sorts of crazy shit. Like when you die, like you're a polygamist, so you can have multiple wives. And like when you die, you're going to have your own like planetoid that God sets up, and you will be a king with your own dominion on your own planet. Like, realistically, if you were raised in the Mormon church, it probably sounds like super dope. Like, heaven sounds dope because they actually kind of get into, I think with previous iterations of Christianity, heaven was kind of like the super like ethereal like plane of existence where you just go and God just kind of like, you know, you just like float in bliss, worshiping God and singing to God for all of eternity. Whereas with Mormonism, effectively it promises you to become your own demigod. So if you weren't raised with any other religious instruction, I could see how that would be attractive.
I always think it's prudent to take a beat and just try and see if more information comes out as to why he may have done this. But Trump has gone out there on the attack, as he often does, and said, this is an attack on Christians. What do you feel?
Well, I mean, Trump is just following the trends. We remember what happened with Charlie Kirk when progressives tried to paint him as some right-wing graper. Turns out that that was all complete and total lies. They were doing damage control. They tried to paint him out to be a right-winger, clear up until it became irrefutable that he was not anymore. And then they just changed the narrative again. So Trump is just following the trends. It is the case that Christians are persecuted in the United States, have been for a long time. And so they're going to continue to be. That's kind of our cross to bear. We were told that that was going to be the case. In fact, that's part of what being a Christian is. As to Trump following the trends and making the assumption, do I kind of agree that you should have caution on these things? I do, but I can completely understand why it would be that he would have that reaction.
John Fugelsang, Benny Johnson posted about this attack on.
Yes, I follow basic safety rules, even when messing with just plastic props.
On the church in Michigan. If a mosque was shut up every month, it would be a crisis for Muslims. If a synagogue was shut up every month, it would be a crisis for Jews. If a temple was shut up every month, it would be a crisis for Hindus. Christians, this is happening to us. Christianity is under attack. It's time to get serious about it. What's your...
Okay. Okay. This is why I hate Benny Johnson, and I think he's one of the biggest charlatans in media. If a mosque was shot up every month, it would be a crisis for Muslims. Okay, that's true, because it would probably be Islamophobic attacks from the broader society. If a synagogue was shot up every single month, it would be a crisis for Jews. Okay, that would be true because they're a fraction of the population, so that would probably be an anti-Semitic attack. If a temple was shot up every month, it would be a crisis for Hindus. That's parallel true. Christians, this is happening to us. Christian churches are being violently targeted at an exponential rate. Christianity is the most persecuted religion on earth. Nothing even comes close. Christianity is under attack. Time to get serious about it. Okay. So in Africa right now, there is a series of conflicts between jihadists and Christian majority populations in West Africa. And so what Muslim jihadist terrorists are doing is they're attacking churches because they know disproportionately it's going to be unarmed people. And so they go there, they massacre the congregation, and as a result of massacring the congregation, they're massacring dozens of unarmed Christians, which is super effed up. And I think the response to that should be military or law enforcement action where you engage in counterinsurgency operations. But what Benny Johnson is doing is he's combining jihadist terrorist attacks in West Africa and Christian persecution, I think in Korea and China. And he's combining that with the Mormon church attack. Now, there's been other attacks. Like I think a few years ago, there was a mass shooting at a church where the congregants and somebody across the street responded with concealed weapon carry, and they actually smoked the shooter before that was in Texas. They smoked the shooter before cops got to him, but the issue was still bad. And then I think we had that trans shooter that happened a month ago or so. And so as a result, I mean, I will accept that there is like violent anti-Christian sentiment in America. Whether or not it's an exponential rate, though, I think that's crazy pants. I think Benny Johnson is trying to feed into the conservative persecution complex instead of dealing with statistics as a whole. I hate Benny Johnson. I think he's one of the biggest lying pieces of shit in politics.
Response to that?
I keep hoping that one of these preventable attacks will inspire our Christian friends on the right to want to make it a little bit harder for unstable white men to easily get weapons that are designed to kill lots of people.
Cringe. All right, cringe. And it's not that unstable white men shouldn't have reduced access to firearms, but I just have a feeling that this is the tip of the iceberg in reference to gun control arguments. So that's why I'm cringing. It has nothing to do with what was said. It has to do with what is implied by by what is said. Fire W says, what's your views about every Abrahamic religion in general? Can you give us a quick opinion? Yeah, sure. So I would say that Judaism was one of the first monotheistic religions besides Zoroastrianism. And I think that monotheism is a naturalist observation that from polytheism, like if you go with like Greco-Roman or Egyptian deistic religions, what you kind of realize is that the gods, quote unquote, are forces of nature. And so, there has to be something that created everything else. And so that's kind of the Abrahamic observation, is that, okay, well, we have the god of the sea, Neptune or Poseidon. We have the god of war, Mars or Ares. We have the god of wisdom, wisdom in storms, weirdly enough, which is like Zeus and or Osiris. And Osiris is also the god of like revivification and resurrection. We have Horus, which is like the young god, and he's kind of like the messianic figure within the Egyptian religion. And so what you kind of realize through trial and error in logic is that there has to be something that's like more powerful than these minor gods that set all this stuff into motion. And so once you follow that logically, then you kind of get to the creator god. And so Judaism, I think, correctly states that the creator god is more powerful than, all these like smaller gods of natural forces. And so that kind of expands into exclusionary monotheism, because I think in the Old Testament, it says, thou shalt put no gods before me. Allegedly, that was a concession to polytheistic Jews, which I know is like a hard concept to believe. But apparently, when Moses was leaving Egypt, there were Jews who actually did worship the minor gods of the region. And so the whole point of thou shalt not put other gods before me or whatever was a concession to the polytheist Jews that they could still worship their polytheistic gods, but they could not put those gods in precedence ahead of Yahweh, the creator God of the universe. So anyways, Judaism is based, but it's obviously rooted in the trappings of its time. I would say Christianity has, in my opinion, the strongest moral message, like the Sermon on the Mount, the Golden Rule, the parable of the stories of the lepers, but also like the story of the Good Samaritan. There's like a lot of really good, really excellent like Christian moral messaging, to the point that I think Christianity is probably like the premier moral messaging for how to live a good life. And then Islam, I think, is probably, in my opinion, does more harm than good, but it's still a universalist, monotheistic religion that technically plays deference to Judaism and Christianity, which I think could be based as long as it's interpreted correctly. And then I think Mormonism is probably cringe, and it's effectively American fan fiction of Christianity. And Joseph Smith was a charlatan and a false prophet, but Mormons themselves are super fucking nice. So I guess as long as Mormons are nice and cool, then I'm not going to go out of my way to make fun of their religion.
Really fast. I really hoped after the awful murder of Mr. Kirk that some of our friends on the right would agree that maybe it's far too easy for unstable 20-something males to get their hands on hardware and pop off and murder people at a political rally.
Pop off and murder people at a political rally. It was a bolt-action rifle. It's a hunting rifle. This is why I was saying, like, jumping immediately to gun control is super fucking cringe. Harmonic says, can you steelman actual paganism? Yeah, I would say this is actually just really interesting, so I want to talk about it, even if you guys just want to get into the content. Jordan Peterson, I think, explained it best, that pagan religions, polytheistic religions, early in world history, early in humanity's understanding of the cosmos, what pagan priests, pagan mythological observers realized is that there are forces outside of humanity that are immortal and eternal. The concept of war is not a mortal concept. War and conflict is an eternal concept. As long as existence and life exist, there will be conflict and war. Therefore, immortal conflict is something outside of humanity that perpetuates forever, as far as the ancient world understood time. Then same thing with creation, and same thing with love, and same thing with beauty. And so they personalized these concepts, like Apollo with knowledge, and Aphrodite with beauty, and Ares and Mars with war. And so they personalized these things. They created mythology around them, and they created like a eternal, personalized mythology around these forces, and then they worshiped these external forces. And the reason why you worship these external forces is because by focusing on, let's say you're going to war and you pray to the god of war, well, maybe he'll make you more brave. Maybe he'll make you more strong. Maybe you'll be more like the god, the eternal force of conflict. Or conversely, if you're worshiping the god of knowledge, let's say that it's peacetime, and you want to worship Apollo, and you do sacrifices to Apollo, and you think about knowledge and how it's procured, and researching things and being intelligent and being thoughtful and meditative. Well, then what's going to happen is by orienting yourself to this like eternal principle, you're going to embody that eternal principle more. And so while I don't think it's literally true, I don't think any pagan religion is literally true, I still think that I can understand the beauty that ancient pagan people understood through worshiping these eternal forces.
He was using an antique rifle, dude. He was using, hang on, he was using an antique rifle.
I know.
An antique bolt.
It was
what
unsecured.
Legislation?
I didn't interrupt you once, my friend. I didn't interrupt you one time.
What legislation do you think would have even been passed that would prevent
if his grandfather had been obliged to keep, if his grandfather had been legally obliged to keep his gun secured at home, that shooting wouldn't have happened, and the Sandy Hook shooting would not have happened.
You can't even demonstrate that's true. For all you know, the kid has the safe code.
You're not letting me finish, and you've interrupted me twice now. Piers, the deal is right-wing Christianity in America has been suckered, and you're really going to, I'm going to answer Piers's question, my friend. I didn't interrupt you. Right-wing Christianity in America has been suckered for a very long time into aligning with power and authority instead of challenging it as Christ did. Donald Trump didn't get the love of evangelicals by promising to do a damn thing Jesus commanded of us. Right-wing Christianity does not fight for the things Jesus commanded and taught us to do. Right-wing Christianity fights for conservative Christian power over every level of society.
I think the reason why I agree with this, that a lot of people, and I'm kind of repulsed by it, there's a lot of conservative politicians right now who are cloaking themselves in religion they're cloaking themselves in religion while simultaneously lying through their teeth every single day. And so I agree with this guy that there are so many people in the public sphere who are taking the Lord's name in vain on the Republican side, where they cloak themselves in religion for their own material ends, that it should borderline be viewed as blasphemy. However, the reason why I think that this girl has this face, and the reason why Andrew Wilson is going to be a condescending prick, and that's going to play well to like a dedicated, devout Christian audience, is because pro-life Christian conservatives have had the biggest win in decades in the past because of Trump. Trump appointing a uber conservative Supreme Court, resulting in the repeal of Roe versus Wade. They view every single abortion, regardless of term, as infanticide. And so no matter what blasphemy or lies or Christian, like anti-Christian power grabs that these lying snake viper politicians participate in, that massive cultural W is going to overshadow all of that, because in their opinion, they went from effectively condoning and embracing 500,000 to 1 million abortions every year, which to them is 500,000 to 1 million murders, to now that's probably substantively reduced. So that's why this perspective, while true, is probably not going to land.
We do not fight to welcome the stranger, as Christ commands in Matthew 25 and as God commands throughout the Old Testament. They do not fight for individuals and nations to care for the sick and the poor, as commanded by Christ in the judgment of nations. They
True. This is actually true. I don't know why she's shocked. I don't know why she's shocked at all. I think she's just making faces.
Fight for right-wing conservative Christian power, and America is suffering from a gun plague where children are now killed by guns more than disease, more than they are killed by car accidents. And I keep praying this is exactly.
Again, making it the gun thing frustrates me. The reason why that kids are killed more by guns than by anything else is because you're including teenagers. All right, teenagers, people aged like I want to say 12 to 29 are the people most likely to be involved in gang-related firearms violence. And so when people say, "Oh, kids are being, slaughtered endlessly more than car accidents and disease and all that kind of stuff," you can say, well, that's statistically true. That's literally true. But I think what's hiding the ball, why it feels like hiding the ball, is because you're including gang activity. And gang activity, that isn't, I don't think gun control is a good solution for gang activity. I think that's more of a sociocultural issue than it is a gun control issue, but we can argue about that in chat in a second.
The sort of situation where religion based on love and empathy will come to our rescue. And yet, our conservative Christian friends are locked in this mindset that somehow personal freedoms matter more than the lives of Americans.
Isabel, you've been pulling. Hang on, let Andrew, I'll come back to you, but let Isabel react, because you've been pulling a lot of faces as you were listening to that.
True. Yeah, Piers, I was on with you the day that Charlie was shot, actually. We were talking about the murder of Irina Zarutska on the train in Charlotte, and I was very baffled by what I was hearing then. Nothing could have prepared me for the slew of attack against anyone who is a conservative Christian in America the last 30 seconds. There is not a single gun law on the books that would have prevented Charlie Kirk from being assassinated at a gun-free zone on the campus of Utah Valley University. When we saw the manifesto published to YouTube about the shooter at the Annunciation Catholic School in Minneapolis, you saw a very specific, detailed attack that was specifically against Christian children and their families, really warping in a very twisted demonic sense the mass with engravings and diary entries saying, "This is my body." I mean, we were watching a very coordinated.
Dude, all right, I'm going to share something that pisses me off. I'm sorry for yapping so much in this content, but I guess technically this is my YouTube channel, so I can yap as much as I want. What pisses me off about our commentariat, what pisses me off about our punditry, is that these are supposed to be the representatives of our society who are smarter, more articulate, they're researching things, they're paying attention to things, but they never improve discourse. These people never even try to improve discourse. They never say, oh, you know what? Here's a policy that would actually be bipartisan, that would work for both the left and the right. Oh, hey, I came up with a creative solution for how we can make sure that we don't do these things, and it doesn't involve curtailing individual human freedom. They never come up with anything creative. All they do is they figure out whatever talking points will rally the conservatives and get them the most fucking mad, or rally the progressives and get them the most fucking mad. And they never actually even try to solve the fucking problems. All they do is they exacerbate and inflame existing issues. Infuriating. And the fact that we have Charlie Kirk, a Trump dick sucker, and Teddy Roosevelt right next to each other in this lady's set pisses me the fuck off. Herda boys.
Attack going back to the Nashville shooting and to many other attacks on churches across the country over the past few years, of which there have been more than 500 attacks on Catholic churches in the United States in the last 5 years or so. This is
what? 500 attacks on Catholic churches in the past 5 years. 500 attacks on Catholic churches in the past 5 years. What? All right, let's take a look. 500 attacks on U.S. Catholic churches since May of 2020. All right, let's take a look at this. Since May 28, 2020, there have been at least 533 attacks against Catholic churches in the United States, including acts of arson, which damaged or destroyed historic churches, spray painting and graffiti of satanic messages, rocks and bricks thrown through windows, statues destroyed, often with heads cut off, and illegal disruptions of Mass. Attacks spiked dramatically after the draft Supreme Court overturning of Roe versus Wade. At least 367 attacks have been perpetrated against Catholic churches since the Supreme Court leak, with many including graffiti with pro-abortion messaging. Crucially, while a handful of the attacks have included theft, the vast majority have only involved property destruction, indicating the primary motive is not material gain. So I would be super curious because they're using attack in the most general sense. So I'm going to admit to some teenage buffoonery, okay? There's a church at the end of my block, and they had a sign that they always posted their like placard out. Right. And the placard always had like some pro-church messaging or whatever. And there was a night, I was probably 19 at the time, maybe 18. So this is like 2 decades ago, where we noticed that the sign kiosk or whatever wasn't secured. So my friend and I, while we were drunk, snuck up to the kiosk sign and we changed the words around to say something homosexual. And so I wonder if that would be considered a attack based off of this criteria. Because they're saying like arson, they're saying pro-abortion graffiti, they're saying, property damage, throwing rocks through windows. This is all considered attacks. So I really wonder what the breakdown in property damage versus, I don't know, arson, where somebody throws a petrol bomb into a church, or a gun attack where people try to shoot parishioners. I wonder how many of these are property, like nuisance, vandalistic property damage versus shootings or arson. I have to assume it's like 80 to 90% vandal buffoonery.
Is clearly a specific attack against Christianity in America. But let's pretend that it's not just about America for a second, because the truth is it's not. Christianity, by the numbers, is by far and large the most persecuted religion on the face of the planet today. In Nigeria, just a few days ago, more than 60 people were killed using hammers and machetes after attending Mass at a Catholic church there in Nigeria. And I read a study the other day, feel free to fact check me on this, to any of the other panelists, that more Christians have been slaughtered in Nigeria for being Christian in the last few years than Palestinians have been killed in Gaza during the midst of the Israeli-Gaza war. But you don't...
Oh, man, because Christians got slaughtered, that makes Gaza okay. Listen. Because I sweep for more moderate positions, it can sound like I am ambivalent to the plight of Christian Nigerians. And so if that comes across in my tone, I apologize. My solution, who is it? Eric Prince went to the Catholic Church. He's the guy who headed up Blackwater. And he asked the Catholic Church for money so he could send a private army to Nigeria to protect Christian congregations. Unironically, I think that's a good idea. I think Eric Prince is insane. I think Blackwater is one of the shadiest private military companies on the planet. That being said, they do hire competent, violent people. And I do think competent, violent people should be used to protect people in places of worship. So if I sound sarcastic or bitter or ambivalent or rude to Andrew Wilson and this random chick, my apologies. But I do unironically think that arming private armies in order to protect congregations of worshipers is a good idea.
See any protests happening in the United States about that today. So it's ridiculous to try to create a left versus right paradigm here, or some sort of attack against the Republican Party, when there very clearly is a manifestation of spiritual warfare and demonic satanic influence in our society trying to attack Jesus Christ in America today.
Andrew, I want to play
Can I explain theosophy, occultism, or New Age philosophy? I actually can't. I don't know enough about it.
Clip.
I'm not a Democrat.
I'm going to let Andrew respond here. Chris Hedge, a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, said on the Secular Talk podcast that Charlie Kirk's assassination was being used to create a new martyr for the movement of Christian nationalism, which he said is a backdoor to American fascism. Let's take a look.
When fascism comes to America, it won't be with swastikas and jackboots, and it will be with the Christian cross and mass recitations of the Pledge of Allegiance. You really got a glimpse of that in the rally in Arizona or rally, whatever you want to call it, the memorial service for Kirk.
Now, Andrew, two questions for you. One is, what is your understanding of what Christian nationalism is? And as a Christian nationalist, are you concerned that it gets hijacked by people who may genuinely be white supremacists, fascists, and so on?
Well, not really. So
So Dank Brandon says abortion is condoned in the Bible. I don't think it is. I think that abortion in the Old Testament is cited as something that can be practiced. Abortion in the Old Testament. The Old Testament does not explicitly mention abortion, and there are no direct laws regarding it. However, several passages have been used to argue both for and against it. Life begins in the womb, the value of life. So Exodus 21, 22, and 25 describes injuring a pregnant woman and the penalty depending on the outcome. If men strive and hurt a woman with child so that her fruit depart and yet no mischief follow, he shall be surely punished according as the woman's husband will lay upon him, and he shall pay as the judges determine. So there's like a civil fine for losing a fetus, I guess. But then if you kill the woman, then it's life for a life. So I don't know, man. I don't know. I think I've heard people mention that there's some like mention in the Old Testament of some kind of poison or some kind of like thing that you can take in order to do an abortion. And so they use that as the Bible condoning abortion. However, I think the pro-life sentiment. Yeah, here we go. What the Bible says about abortion. Abortion is not murder. A fetus is not considered a human life in Exodus 21, 22. That's the one we were talking about. The Bible places no values on fetus or infants less than 1 month old. Leviticus 27, 6. Fetuses and infants less than 1 month old are not considered persons. Number 3:15 through 16. God sometimes approves of killing of fetuses. Here's some biblical passages. God sometimes kills newborn babies to punish their parents. God sometimes causes abortions by cursing unfaithful wives. So yeah, there's like Old Testament argument for it, but the thread of pro-life sentiment and life being such a divine gift to humanity that ending that gift prematurely in any way, especially in the New Testament, is a grievous sin. That's pretty common as well. So yeah, I understand there might be a dualistic interpretation where the Bible could be argued to support abortion or not care about abortion, but obviously the vast majority of American Christians do not believe that whatsoever.
The idea of Christian nationalism is just that Christians remain the culturally dominant force in the United States. That's it. That's the entire proposition. Everything else is an addition. So the gentleman over here, for instance, a quick question for you. Is Jesus Christ God?
I believe so, but I don't believe in imposing my opinions on others.
Okay, got you. So Jesus Christ is God. So all the religions are false?
No, I don't believe that at all. I believe in my house there are many mansions.
So here's...
No. This sucks. Okay. So there's non-denominational Christian sects, and there's how else do I phrase this? There's non-denominational Christian sects, there's Unitarian churches, which a lot of people don't believe are Christian. And what a lot of non-denominational churches argue, and what Unitarians argue, and what even the Catholic Church to some degree argues, is that all of humanity is pursuing some degree of truth. We just get to different approximations to truth. And so as a result, any moral or spiritual wisdom found in Buddhism or Taoism or Hinduism or Judaism or Islam or Mormonism, any of that truth, that moral and spiritual truth could be true. But then, of course, like the Catholic Church is going to say, but we're the closest. We are the closest to God's truth. And so what Andrew Wilson is saying, which I think is funny, is that there are biblical statements from the gospel where I think, I forget who it is, but they say like, there is no path to heaven or no path to God but through me, right? And so this is effectively God trademarked, where some Christians interpret that in order to say, well, you cannot get to heaven. You cannot be a true Christian unless you are a follower of Christ who believes that Christ is the Messiah. And so this is funny because this is actually like a huge spiritual schism between what I would argue are progressive Christians and giga conservative literalist Christians. So this is going to be a painful argument.
God has many ways of the truth.
Yeah,
I don't think I'm better than anyone because Christ's movement is about humility. Christ's movement is not about public domination and power.
I just want to make sure I got this right. Are all other religions false?
I don't believe that at all. No, and I don't believe right-wing Christianity is true either.
Is Islam
right-wing Christianity does not
answer my question, dude?
MAGA
is Islam
does
true?
Not fight for the teachings of Christ.
Is Islam true?
Why?
Is Islam true?
Islam believes in the same God as Christians. Do you believe we should welcome the stranger as God and Christ command, or do you believe in Donald Trump?
Wait, they believe Jesus Christ is God?
It's not my religion. They believe Christ is a prophet.
So then it's
the Virgin
false.
Mary is mentioned more in the Holy Quran than she's mentioned in the Bible.
I'm going to walk you through the logic here. If Jesus Christ is God,
what are the Christ teachings that Trump fights for, my friend?
Then it is the case.
What are the gospel teachings your movement fights for? Your movement uses Christ as a prop, and you legislate against his commands.
Stop filibustering.
Dude, you interrupted
me. Your question. So I was in the middle of it. I asked you a single question and was getting to the follow-up, and you go on these long diatribes.
You asked
two questions. Listen to what I'm saying.
You asked two questions, my friend.
Logically, if it's the case that Jesus Christ is God, and that is true, then Islam has to be false. And you have to proclaim that that is the case as a follower of Christ.
Too bad the founding fathers didn't have that system in our country.
Well, the thing that's so funny is that you say that you're a progressive.
The founding fathers, many of them were deists, which is what I am, by the way. Okay. You guys don't have to agree with me. I understand a bunch of you are filthy, anti-theist liberals. Okay, I understand that. How European of you to be drunk at 19. So true, Sapien Green. So true. So creation is amazing, or existence, if you want to be a pedant, is amazing. The fact that the universe was born by best naturalistic records around 14 billion years ago, the fact that planets and stars and planetoids and moons formed is amazing. The fact that some of them are capable of hosting life, and as a result, intelligence can emanate from, the muck in the mire, I think logically through abiogenesis, where dead, dormant material is hit with lightning and it's cooked in a bubble of methane and it's cooled in the waters of the world and then it's warmed up again by geothermic activity. And the fact that this mix of natural factors eventually creates the precursors to life. I forget what they're called. It's like the precursor to protein. There's something, it's the Miller-Urey experiment. And the Miller-Urey experiment, they created like the world. They created Earth in its early stages within a test tube where they shocked it with lightning. They ran it through cool water and hot water. And what ended up happening is, even without any original bioorganic material, the precursors to bioorganic material appeared, which is awesome. And so the fact that that happened, and then now, billions of years after the formation of abiogenetic life, you and I are able to have this conversation, even if you don't believe it's like a spiritual miracle or like a supernatural miracle. In my opinion, it's a fucking miracle. It's something that's incredible, and when you think about it, it should inspire some level of awe that you and I are even capable of having this conversation through the internet. And so I think that there's something that set this thing in motion. Whether or not that process is conscious or unconscious, whether or not that thing develops consciousness, whether or not there's intelligent design, whether or not there's eternal moral consequences, or if we just suffer moral consequences within our short lives, I kind of don't think any of that matters, because the system is so impressive and so cool and so complex and so weird that what religion does, in my opinion, is it contemplates the purpose and mystery and morality of life. And I think that what anti-theists and atheists do, which I think is very cringe, is that because they don't believe that there's consequences outside of their individual lives, and because they don't believe that there's an afterlife, and because they don't believe that this process was conscious and intentional, they stop analyzing morality. They stop analyzing history. They stop analyzing spiritual contemplation. They stop meditating. And I think that's cringe. I think that's cringe. I think it's hubristic. I think it's egocentric. I think it's dumb. I think it's naive. And so as a result, even if there isn't a God, even if there isn't an afterlife, I still think contemplating moral, spiritual, religious mystery it's time well spent. I think you will live a better life, even if you're a non-literalist religious person. Like, you just think that religion is like purely metaphorical and mythological, but you just study it in order to understand how humanity functions. I think you will be a better person at the end of that experience than if you ignore it completely.
Catholic, you're worried about Christians in power. You say that Christians are out here. Oh, Andrew, Christians are out here. They should be looking at these other immigrants as religious refugees. That's what you said, your own
They're
words.
actually Christian refugees at our border. They are Christian refugees that y'all have been socialized to call illegals.
Then how come you lobbied for Kamala Harris, raised money for the Harris campaigns, a Democrat operative, when she said that she wanted staunch border policies? She literally went to Guatemala and said, "You're not allowed to come. Do not come."
I know she did. I'm not a Democrat, my friend. I'm not a Democrat. Her policies cause less harm than Trump's.
You happen to be a Democrat operative.
Her policies cause less harm than Trump's, my friend. And her policies were closer to the actual teachings of Christ than Trump. Let me ask you
That's true. Democrats are not perfect Christians. As a matter of fact, you could argue that they do substantively anti-Christian behavior. However, Trump is worse. It's true.
That would be the exact same logic that we would have.
May I respectfully ask you one question? Can I ask you one question?
You're such a hypocrite, by the way.
Will you please? May I please ask you one question now that you've asked me so many, and now that you've called me names? Dude, hit the other cheek. I can take it. Call me more names. I want to ask you something. Please tell me one actual gospel commandment or teaching.
See, this is where Andrew Wilson is obnoxious, in my opinion, though. Have the conversation. You don't have to dominate every single millisecond of the conversation. Let the other person talk so the conversation is at least interesting. This is one of my frustrations. I know, like, Zara is in here or something, and they're an Andrew Wilson fan. Listen, it's fucking, I'm not going to lie. If you're an Andrew Wilson fan and you like the way that he conducts conversations, good for you. As somebody who wants to participate in debating conversations, or somebody who reviews debates and conversations, it gets fucking boring after a while. Okay? Just hearing somebody, whenever somebody else tries to present an argument, hearing constant like cackling and interruptions, it makes it so you can't actually get to the meat of the disagreement. And as a result, the conversation sucks. So that's where, for me, my criticism of Andrew Wilson is not that he's, I don't think Andrew Wilson is unintelligent at all. I think Andrew Wilson's probably pretty unintelligent, or excuse me, I think Andrew Wilson is pretty intelligent. My argument against Andrew Wilson is not that he's not rhetorically gifted. I think he's rhetorically gifted. My argument against Andrew Wilson is that he's become so obsessed with winning a conversation that he no longer can have a good conversation. And so the content suffers as a result of him constantly being a dick. That's my primary criticism.
Complete fraud.
Please tell me one actual gospel. Please tell us all and the viewers watching one actual gospel commandment or teaching of Christ that the MAGA movement fights for. Not what conservative Christians like. Something Christ, who is a mascot to this movement, actually commanded of us. Chapter and verse, if you can.
Sure.
Welcome the stranger. Individuals and nations take care of the poor. Stop executing people. Your movement.
Do you want me to answer?
Or are you going to answer the question then?
Please do.
Do you want me to answer, or
Please
are you
do.
going to answer? So the truth of the matter is
Give me
that
one.
if you're really as concerned with the poor as you claim, you would be all about the MAGA movement, who's trying to stop job
I'm asking
crushing
you for one
immigration
teaching of the
to
poor.
the United States. I'm giving it to you. Calm down.
Christ commands us to welcome the
Don't
stranger.
talk over
down
each
so
other,
I
we
can answer
can't
your
hear.
question. Calm down so I can answer your question, lunatic. I'm going to answer it precisely. Here's how it
The
works.
names of this guy.
If it is the case that you make these bold claims like you do in your book, that Christians ought to be paying taxes for the poor so that we could, for the poor, we got to give it all to the poor. That's what your view is.
That's not my
then it would be
suggestion,
the
bro. That's
case
Jesus' suggestion.
then it would be the case. Then it would be the case that you would not want these job-crushing waves of mass migration come to the United States, which
One
displace
teaching of Jesus,
the poor.
Andrew. Just one.
They
Give me one.
displace the poor.
Give me one
I
teaching
just
of Christ.
explained to you that
Give me
if
one
it's the
teaching of
case,
Christ you fight for.
Sorry, this doesn't hit for me at all. The reason why it doesn't hit for me at all is because this guy asked for a biblical example, preferably chapter and verse. Andrew Wilson didn't do that, but he's acting like he did. Now, from a utilitarian secular lens, I see exactly what Andrew Wilson is saying, which is that if you invite massive waves of illegal labor into your country, you depress wages for the working class. Therefore, people are in less than subsistence financial positions. And as a result, you're making the problem of poverty worse, not better. I could understand that, but that's not Christian. Okay? The Christian perspective on poverty is take the shirt off of your back and give it to your neighbor without expecting any kind of compensation. The Christian perspective is invite all to your table and God will provide. Like it's the bread and loaves. It's the fishes. For those of you who are like scripturally unfamiliar, there's a miracle that Jesus Christ performed as a minister or whatever, when he was talking to the masses, which was that there was a time that he invited a bunch of people to come hang out and like listen to him or whatever. And his followers were in a panic. His disciples were in a panic because he had recruited an audience of like hundreds or thousands. And what was happening is they didn't have enough food in order to feed everybody. And Jesus basically says, don't worry about it. God will provide. And then what ended up happening was out of an initial, if we're looking at a non-miraculous explanation, out of an initial inventory of what was it, like 5 loaves and 2 fish or whatever? I forget what the original one was. But out of a very paltry initial amount of food, the food just kept flowing. Like there was just like endless amounts of food for the audience to consume. Matter of fact, what is it? Jesus Christ, loaves of bread and fish. Feeding of the multitude. 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish to feed thousands of people, leaving 12 baskets of leftovers. So the miraculous explanation is that Jesus Christ, using, God's power, using warp powers, like took a bunch of like bread and fish and multiplied them to the point that they were capable of feeding thousands of people. The secular explanation is that through an initial gift offering of a paltry amount of 2 fish and 5 loaves, everybody within the multitudes provided additional food and bread so everybody could eat. The whole point of the thing is trust in God's ability to provide. That's like the entire moral lesson. So for Andrew to say, well, it's anti-Christian to invite a bunch of people in who you can't take care of, that is actually in direct contradiction to the moral and spiritual lesson of the miracle of 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. Jesus almost explicitly commands the opposite, which is invite in the stranger, invite in the poor, invite in the hungry, invite in the destitute, and God will provide what is necessary for everyone to survive. So, sorry, this guy just has a better command of Scripture compared to Andrew Wilson's, I would argue, secular analysis of Scripture.
I just did. I just explained to you, if you really want to uplift the poor, you don't do it with crushing mass migration.
What Jesus teaching did you explain?
I just explained to you that by...
No, you didn't. You used a secular explanation, Andrew Wilson, and now you're acting angry about it. That's a secular explanation. You used macro and microeconomics to explain how if we invite the stranger and the poor and the destitute into our society, there will not be enough in order to take care of people, whereas that's anti-scriptural. It's anti-Christian.
Your view of what Christians ought to be doing, we are doing it. Do you not understand this?
Christ says that individuals and nations will be judged. Christ says in Matthew 25.
Numinax for $5 says, Connor, Trump's eradicating anti-Christian bias EO would consider what you did as an attack. Yeah, probably. Lol. Whoops. Just did a little bit of hate criming. Just a little bit of casual hate criming when I was a youth.
5, that individuals and nations will be judged, heaven or hell,
and
by how they care for the sick, care for the poor, welcome the stranger, and care for those in prison. MAGA legislates and votes against these commandments of Jesus.
And what was
true?
The Kamala Harris? What was the Kamala Harris Christian doctrine that you were for?
Kamala Harris is closer by light years to the teachings of Christ than the Republican Party, but I don't consider the Democrats. I'm not a Democrat. Where
you said that like 7 times, by the way.
On the treatment of immigrants, on anti-racism, on women's equality, on helping the poor, on making healthcare more accessible, on having less gun violence. I could do it all day, my friend.
All right, Isabel.
So, was that the epistle that made it up? Jesus said, "Thou shalt not have guns."
Gentlemen, let the lady on the panel talk, please. Isabel.
See, I don't understand the smug laughter again, because if you there's 2 ways to interpret the beginning, like right before Christ gets crucified. Okay, right before Christ gets crucified, he's going to the gardens of Gethsemane. I don't know what the garden is actually called. He's going to the gardens of Bethesda or something. I forget, but he talks to his followers and he says, he who does not have a sword, go out and buy one. And so the militant interpretation of that is that even within the Christian framework, there is a legalistic support for self-defense, okay? Where, Jesus was worried that his followers, if they were unarmed, they were going to be attacked and they were going to be killed, okay? That is the more militant interpretation of Christianity, where you're trying to find excuses in which you can engage in violence. However, another interpretation that I was raised with, because I was raised by pacifist Christians, is that Jesus actually didn't want his followers to fight with material violence in the real world. Because what ends up happening is Jesus is taken by the cops of the day, and one of his followers reaches out and cuts the ear off, like he slashes at one of his enemies, and he cuts the ear off of his enemy. And then Jesus says, no, stop. And he goes up and he heals the guy's ear. And he says, he who lives by the sword dies by it, And so the question, and then also that coupled with turning the other cheek, that coupled with the Sermon on the Mount, the question is whether or not Jesus ordered his followers to be armed because he wanted them to be capable of defending themselves when the cops came after them unjustly, or whether or not God set his followers up to have weapons. That way he could, teach that moral lesson about he who lives by the sword dies by it. And you can interpret it either way. But the funny thing is, like, Andrew Wilson's being fucking smug about this, but pretending for a second that Christianity, that there aren't as many anti-violent verses from Christ himself as there are any legalistic interpretations of violence from the Old Testament. I think it's fucking cope. I think this laugh is absolutely fucking cope.
Piers, I think this is precisely the problem, because it just goes to show how in Western society today, we are living in two completely alternate realities, largely based on the media that we are consuming, where you genuinely see this belief parroted among very mainstream Christians that the teachings and the policies of someone like Kamala Harris, who actively told Christians at her own rally, you folks are at the wrong rally, please leave, there is no place for you here, that her policy would have been better for the United States of America. This is a woman who championed the abortion of more than 1 million babies per year in the United States of America, including through all 9 months of pregnancy and partial birth abortion, which
Bible's
is
not against abortion.
And that's what I was telling you, because you can go to the Old Testament and find some abortion passages, but Christians are going to view that as so fucking abhorrent. Especially American evangelicals are going to view that so abhorrent that this guy, even if he brought up all the Old Testament scripture where abortion is accepted, it's not going to matter to these people. They're going to view that as so like evil that effectively this guy said, yeah, I'm a Christian, but I'm for infanticide. That's what he just said in their minds.
In the sanctity of life, especially as the Catholic Church, I should know myself, and maybe it's time to crack open a catechism to remind ourselves of that.
Abortions are legal and free in Israel right now. Judaism doesn't ban them.
Promoting actual immigration policy
from that very Christian nation of Israel.
And when it comes to centering immigration policy,
Christ's religion doesn't ban abortion.
It starts with stopping the horrifying human trafficking of children and the rape of babies and toddlers that happens on the southern border every day. When it starts by lifting people out of poverty, it starts by giving people actual positions of employment that give them a long-term trajectory for financial success. These are Christian values, but our twisted, disgusting media in America and beyond has allowed for a very inverse reaction from Christians to believe in this version of toxic empathy where we are supposed to tolerate and endorse evil and call that following Christ. And I think the last few weeks have been a really powerful example for Christians around the world to realize we no longer can tolerate demonic evil in the spiritual warfare.
How did you feel, Isabel? How did you, Isabel, just on that point, how did you feel when at Charlie Kirk's memorial, his widow, Erica, made an incredibly powerful announcement of forgiving the killer of her husband, but then Donald Trump.
Fashion 40 says, Connor, what's worse to deal with in a debate? Pisco's yes or no, or Andrew's argumentative style? In my opinion, Andrew's argumentative style. Pisco has such like little brother energy that when he's being frustrating, I can typically deal with it. Whereas one of the things that really frustrates me is when somebody is smug but incorrect. That's one of the most fucking annoying things to deal with in a debate whatsoever. And that was one of the things about Cooley, okay? Going back to that debate, I don't think that debate with Cooley was like particularly good. I don't think that I forced him down any logic chains. I don't think I really like aggressively challenged him on his logic. I think I just kind of let him dictate the tempo of the conversation and then just kind of called him a moron every now and then, which is not necessarily good debate tactics. But what's interesting about that, or I mean, what's frustrating about that, I suppose, is that with Cooley, he has the exact same tactic as Andrew Wilson, which is just smugly being incorrect. Like there could be something demonstrably incorrect where he's like, wow, I never knew that recruiters use sexuality in order to recruit young men. That's cringe. And it's like, you've never talked to a recruiter. You've never been near a military. I didn't know that people aged 18 to 22 cared so much about sex going into the military. Like you've obviously never had a conversation with an 18 to 22-year-old enlisted person ever about military service. Like that's so obvious just from that statement alone. But because he just guffaws and acts confident, that allows him to continue within the debate with his little circle jerk audience believing that he just made an epic point, which is fucking cringe. Being confidently incorrect is still being incorrect and cringe.
Followed and said he hates his enemies and is still trying to work on the forgiveness bit. What did you feel?
I don't even think he said that. I think he just said Charlie and I are different in that Charlie forgave his enemies or loved his enemies, and I don't. I don't think he said he was going to work on it at all.
I mean, as a Christian, what did you feel about that? The two exchanges?
Yeah, sure. If you listen to the president's full speech, he goes on to laugh about that, and it clearly was delivered as a joke. I'm not here to speak for the president.
Oh no, I think he meant it.
But
I don't think he was joking.
Just based on every single speech that was given at that event other than the president's, and if you took the time to watch all 6 hours of it, you can see this was not a rah right-wing political rally.
Yes, it was, and we watched like 3 hours of it. What the fuck are you talking about? Yes, it was. Holy shit. It might as well have been a fucking pep rally. It might as well have been a pep rally. I saw something different. Whatever this chick saw at the Charlie Kirk funeral, I saw something different. I saw a right-wing pep rally. That's what I saw. I did not see a funeral.
Every single speaker, including President Trump, took their time on stage to spread the gospel, to share love of God, to say we can no longer be afraid of proclaiming our faith in the world based on potential political backlash. And I saw one particular take that really bothered me from Destiny, who I know has been a common guest here on the Piers Morgan show, of people saying, you know, this was indicative of a...
Thank you, CD Sockdem. When I was looking for the precursors to life that form abiogenetically, which I don't know if it's a word, but it's almost a word. When I was looking for the precursors to life that form abiogenetically, it's amino acids. Thank you, CD Sockdem.
Of a Nazi rally. This was completely indistinguishable from a Nazi rally led...
Thanks, Destiny. Thanks for that tweet.
By Adolf Hitler. I don't know the last time a Nazi rally encouraged you to forgive your enemies and the people who violently assassinate your husband.
Well, also
only one speaker did.
Well, hang on, just to be clear, also there were a lot of Jewish people at this so-called Nazi rally, which a bit like the Madison Square Garden rally before the election, when they tried to call that the new version of the 1938 rally at MSG, was completely absurd. There was actually a Holocaust survivor sitting in the front row. Let me come back on this issue, if I may, John, to your book and your interpretation of Christian nationalism. I want to just quote the definition that you give of it on page 20 of your book. At its...
You guys are nasty. You guys are nasty. Making Kamala Harris, I'm going to come jokes. Jesus.
Core, Christian nationalism is the belief that the United States was founded as a Christian nation and should remain one today, with laws and policies guided by a particular vision of Christianity. Unlike ordinary religious faith, which is personal and spiritual, Christian nationalism is political. It merges national identity with religious identity, insisting to be a true American is to be a true Christian and vice versa. And I suppose what I would say to that is, America historically has been a Christian country. 62% of Americans today are Christian, which is nearly 2/3 of
90% in the 90s.
Yeah, but my point being that it is still a large majority Christian nation. So
yes,
the idea that all of them are being political by identifying as Christian nationalists.
Didn't say that.
No, I'm just saying if you extrapolate your statement that the Christian nationalism is political, all those people would identify, I would think, as Christian nationalists, right? Uncensored is...
Nope. Not listening to your advertisements. Thank you. Go take supplements and buy various soaps. Okay? You use the discount code from Piers Morgan's various soaps and supplements.
Well, only about 30% of the country identifies with the main traits of Christian nationalism, and yet they make up 2/3 of the Supreme Court. But it is a very powerful movement that seeks to insert a very narrow, again, Christ-free version of Christianity onto every level of our government. The Founding Fathers were very thorough about this. Our official religion is all and or none. And if you are fighting against other religions because you think you're superior because of Jesus, then you don't actually follow Jesus, because his entire movement was about humility, uplifting the less fortunate, fighting for the marginalized, not total right-wing domination of politics or the school board. Again, I don't see any actual teachings of Christ that the right wing fights for. The only thing Donald Trump and Jesus have in common is they both spent a lot of time around hookers and they both use ghostwriters.
Dude, look at this chick's face. No way. Dude. They both hung out with a lot of hookers, and they both used ghostwriters. And this chick is like, oh my god. Bruh. That was a boomer joke. That was a banger. That was solid. That was solid. So hold up. This is where I have autism, okay? And if I don't have autism, I definitely have something similar to autism, okay? So I wish that Andrew Wilson knew and understood I wish he knew and understood the how do I phrase this? I wish he knew and understood the history of Christendom, okay? Because when it comes to Christianity, there was a part of like Revelations and the later books of the Bible after Christ's death where it says like, don't worry about the material world. The material world will take care of itself. You know, the rapture's going to be soon. It's going to be at hand. God's going to come back and he's going to take you into heaven through the rapture and all that kind of crap. Well, what happened is over the intervening centuries, as new generations of Christians lived and died without being raptured and Jesus not coming back, what they started to say is like, okay, well, we're going to have to live in the material world. And there's also biblical parts of that that say that it is Christians' responsibility to prepare the kingdom of God. And so Constantine's Christian advisors, Constantine was a Roman general who was fighting in a Roman civil war, and I think he was a pagan at the time. A lot of his generals were Christian, and they said, okay, well, we've been persecuted for centuries now, and we have secular power. We have the ability to back the future emperor of Rome. Why don't we try to instantiate Christ's kingdom on earth as stewards of the Christian faith? And that's kind of where Christendom, in my opinion, was born, where secular power was allowed to be married with the power of the church in order to pursue the idealized Christian world, which of course had enforced belief in Christ as the Messiah, which of course looked down on sexual promiscuity, which of course punished people for being heretics. And so in a lot of ways, Christendom itself was not very Christ-like, but I think that the motivations of the people who lived within Christendom, the kingdoms of Christ, I think they were attempting to realize God's kingdom on earth. So I think that Andrew Wilson could make a historical argument here that, this perception that Christianity can never be married to secular power is ahistorical and bullshit. And here's how you understand Christendom is that we are the stewards of Christ on planet Earth, and therefore we are trying to create a better union between Christ and humanity. Therefore, if we have to use secular power in order to evangelize to the broader world, it is what it is, because we're in a spiritual battle for the souls of humanity, and who and what you worship and how you worship it can have impact on your eternal soul. Now, that of course is like anti-liberal, it's anti-American, it's anti-enlightenment. But there's no contradiction in that worldview. That contradiction in the worldview is that Jesus and the Bible are the ultimate arbiters of authority, because Jesus was God, and he came to fulfill the law, not to destroy it. And therefore, it's actually their duty as Christians to create Christ's kingdom on earth. They'll disagree, but it's not hypocritical.
All right, Andrew. Andrew.
That was amazing. Honestly, I'm happy she's so shocked, because he's still 100% correct.
Really Andrew, let me just ask you a question, which is this.
Happy to talk about scripture, by the way. Happy to talk about what Christ actually says versus Republican policies.
Me too.
Okay, Andrew, my question for you would be this. Under Christian nationalism, what happens to Jews, Muslims, Hindus, atheists? I mean, what happens to those people if the identity of the United States is to be a Christian nationalist country? Then where does that leave?
Simon Simple says that's like destiny in reference to Andrew Wilson being not interested in having a productive conversation. I don't even know if that's true, bro. Like, if you look at the Pangburn events, like, yeah, he's getting dunks in, but typically it's the other person that sets the tempo of the conversation, in my opinion. I don't know if you guys agree with that, but I still find that oftentimes what happens in a Destiny conversation is that yeah, Destiny can be edgy. Yes, he can make stupid jokes. Yes, he can be cruel. He can be mean or whatever. But if you walk in there and you're like, hey, Steven, you know, I don't want to fight you. I want you to really consider what I'm saying to see if I can change your worldview. Then Steven will typically like try to entertain the other person's argument. Whereas if you come in and you're a total twat, then yeah, he's going to treat you like a total twat and he's going to be an asshole and he's going to be looking for the dunks. So I actually don't know if I agree with this characterization. Now, maybe Andrew Wilson has like more good faith conversations elsewhere, and maybe I could find those ones, but I'm just going to say like his most popular content is when he's being a douche. That's true of both Andrew Wilson and Destiny for sure, is that their most popular content is when they're being douchebags.
People who don't identify as Christian nationalists.
Yeah, same thing that happens when you have state religions in nations right now. Nothing. So there's Western nations, people forget about this, that have churches. They actually have the church of whatever the nation is. And guess what? You're still free to pray how you want. Guess what? Here in the United States, when it was 95% Christian, identified 95% as Christian, you can still.
I think they said it was like 65% earlier, so I don't know where that 95% is coming from, but okay.
Be a Jew. You can still
and yet
be a
they're
Muslim.
under siege, right? They're persecuted, right?
That would be a bonus in our favor that we're not doing the persecuting, doofus. So the thing is, it's so funny here. It's like even when we have full spectrum, even when we have full spectrum dominance, Jesus called people vipers like you.
Here's my other frustration with it as well. So just talking about like Andrew Wilson's rhetoric or whatever. It's like I seriously think 70% of the audience, and no offense, I have a 3,000 IQ audience, so this is obviously not true of the community of Grill Hottists. The Grill Hottists, because they're 3,000 IQ, what happens is people say words and they make pictures in their brain that represent what people are saying in their own minds so they can understand concepts and then argue with it within their own brains, because I have a disproportionately intelligent chat. And I do that. When I'm listening to people, I'm not just responding to the emotions of what's being said. I'm building little mind structures of what people are saying, and then I'm dealing with that. But I think you guys will recognize that 70% of the Twitch and YouTube poll audience are fucking idiots. And the reason is because you have experience with that audience. And I think that 70% easily of the Twitch and YouTube politics audience, they're not actually responding to what's being said. They're exclusively responding to the emotional tempo of the argument. So they're not even noticing that this guy asked Andrew Wilson for a scripture in verse of Jesus Christ, and instead Andrew Wilson made a secular argument. They didn't even notice that. They just noticed that Andrew Wilson called him a viper and a piece of shit. That's all they noticed. And so I'm going to invite my chat to be better than the rest of Twitch and YouTube politics by actually paying attention to the arguments that are being made. So with that being said, I do see a couple other super chats coming in. I will get to them, I promise, but I am going to shill. I personally love you guys. Seriously, last month was a phenomenal month. Monday was a phenomenal day. Yesterday was a phenomenal day. So thank you for your viewership, but also thank you for your financial support. Like the stream, that's free. Share it with your friends. Engage with chat, that's also free. And spreading the word of Grill Hottism is fantastic, and it's free. And then also engage it in chat. There's lots of funny, interesting, cool people in my chat, which is why I talk to them so often. Then super chats if you got them. If you're brokies, do not worry about it. Just pay your bills, take care of yourself. However, if you're enjoying the content and you want to share your love and your joy of the content, please super chat and or give memberships. I parasocially love you. Thank you for being here.
Even when we have full spectrum dominance in culture,
He was calling out the conservative religious bosses when he did that, my friend.
We are far better and leadership capacities than secular atheists are. Guys like this, their entire
you should be in power, right? Power for the Christian, yes. Power above others,
crux of what you want is just gay sex, right? Isn't that really what your criticism is?
No, sir. You're lying about me because the argument makes you uncomfortable.
What are you upset?
No, sir.
What are you upset about cultural Christians for? What are you actually upset about here?
Are you mad? 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 Have you guys seen that? It's a classic Demon Mama debate, and it was one of the funniest and worst debates I've ever seen. Destiny, Demon Mama, are you mad? So what happened was Demon Mama wanted to have a conversation about something. I forget what it was. They were like insulting each other. And then Steven just replicates.
Hey, hello.
Demon Mama's
hello. What are you doing?
Facial expressions.
You shoehorn into being an incel. Why?
Wait, what? Wait, is that your like unironic read of the conversation?
Sorry, we're gonna take a little content break just to take a look at this because this is classic. 4 years ago, 2021. Insane time in Twitch and YouTube politics.
That is like the easiest read of the world.
Okay.
You should go back. Wait, no, wait, hold on. I have to leave soon, so I don't have time for you to like ramble on to your dipshit
come
points.
on.
Okay?
Wait. I just came on to your fucking show.
Yeah, that's great. I know, but I'm just telling you. So I'm just telling you. I'm just telling. I didn't sleep on cam. I talked for more than you both did combined for the conversation. Okay.
No, you didn't.
You're really great at doing like all of the like clown symbols to show like how desperately you're not owned. But literally all of us like listen through.
Oh,
I'm not
so sensitive.
The only person. You came on to my show and you cried for 3 hours about me bullying people on Twitter, and you're gonna pretend that I'm the mad one.
Dude, you're still mad about that?
No,
you know that everyone thinks you got blown out.
You know that when you keep saying you're mad over and over and over again, all you do is sound mad, right? When you scream over and over again, are you mad? 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 You know that just makes you sound really mad, right?
And somebody did a techno remix of this, which I loved. And so I'm not gonna make you suffer through the entire thing, but effectively it's just Steven replicating Demon Mama's facial expressions and rhetoric back to her by being an asshole, asking Demon Mama one question that Steven wanted to answer, and then saying Demon Mama can ask a question when he's done, and then hanging up the call as soon as Steven's done with his question. It was not Steven's best faith moment, but the Are You Mad techno remix of this debate is actually fire.
If Christians are in power, what do you think's going to happen to you? What do you think's going to happen to you if Christians are in power? What?
I think that the founding fathers were very specific more than once and said in the Treaty of Tripoli, ratified by Washington, signed by Adams, the government of the United States is in no way founded.
Me, I'm white, straight, and male, and I'm culturally Christian. I believe in, the moral prescriptions of Christianity, even though I don't believe it literally. I don't think Christ is the Messiah. Sorry if that's blasphemy to a few of my Christian audience members. However, I do think that Christianity has some of the best moral messaging out of all major religions. And so, what's going to happen to me? Nothing. What's going to happen to brown people? Well, they're going to get hunted down and deported to failed states, and they're going to get injured or killed or sodomized or tortured in El Salvador. That's what's going to happen to them. When it comes to gay people, they're not going to be evangelized to. They're going to be socially and legally prohibited from participating in public life. Now, maybe that could be like when it comes to wearing BDSM gear and walking around in public festivals with your dick out, maybe, that'll tickle me a little bit that people can no longer be naked and sexual in public. Maybe that'll be funny for me. But as far as I have lots of cool, normal-ish gay and trans friends, and they're going to get treated like shit, and they're going to get attacked both, privately, but also by the state. That's not cool. So just because some sex degenerates get punished doesn't mean that I think my other gay and bisexual and trans friends should be punished. So, yeah, like there's plenty of anti-Christian evil shit that's going to happen under the Trump regime. How about this one? What's Christian about Donald Trump being credibly accused of raping 14 to 17-year-old girls, and right now the Republican Christian conservative establishment is ignoring that? What's Christian about that? What's Christian about backstabbing our enemies and allowing them to be killed? What's Christian about cutting off aid to the world that's predicted and projected to kill hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of the world's most poor and vulnerable people? What's Christian about that? I don't think very much.
It's going to happen to you.
Religion. I don't consider your movement to be of Christ, my friend. I don't consider your movement to be of Christ.
Are in power.
Okay, if everyone talks at the same time, I can promise you.
Trump's trying to ban an entire religion from entering the country, my friend.
If everyone talks at the same time, I can guarantee you one thing: nobody can understand.
Terrorists from entering the country.
No one will understand what anyone says if you all talk over each other. Please, guys, if you talk over each other, no one can hear a word you're all saying. Isabel.
The founding fathers were actually quite clear that you were expected to understand a working knowledge of submission to God in order to be an active participant in governance in the United States. Of the 13 original states, all of them, every single original state constitution of the 13 states required a declaration of faith to serve in the state government. 9 of them required you to have a declaration of faith as a Christian to serve in the state government. The Declaration
and yet the U.S. Constitution forbids it.
Rob says, what do you make of Andrew's inability to defend Christian doctrine? I mean, this guy is dedicated to Christianity in name only, not dedicated to power in all of his acts. I think that Andrew probably is a believer in the Messiah. I think he probably does go to church, even though he drinks and he smokes. I think that being said, intended or not, I do think that to some degree he does take the Lord's name in vain. Because if you were a Christian, let's say that you genuinely believe that how you spend the afterlife is predicated on how you conduct yourself in this life. Well, you should probably deeply understand the tenets of your own religion, right? And yet, I find that his understanding of religion is kind of cursory. It seems very surface level. His understanding of church history feels pretty cursory and surface level. Now, that's most people, right? Most people do not bother to understand religion on like a scriptural foundational level. But yeah, I do find that to be silly. Silly is the nicest way that I can put it. And what's funny is that I consistently find that I seem to have like a better command of scripture and a better command of like parable and passage, at least to be able to even bring them up and explain them during a debate or a reaction, than a shitload of self-professed Christian nationalists. So yeah, I think it's taking God's name in vain, which is like one of the worst things you can do. A lot of people think that taking God's name in vain is just uttering the phrase, God damn it. That's what they think taking the Lord's name in vain is. But Dennis Prager of all people taught me this, that taking the Lord's name in vain is not uttering the phrase, God damn it. That's a form of taking the Lord's name in vain. But the worst way to take God's name in vain is to cloak yourself in the righteousness of religion while exclusively serving yourself. And I seriously think that it's so repulsive to me. It's actually what drove me out of the church originally, was the self-righteous taking the Lord's name in vain that I saw every single day. I think that's why I ended up hating most Christians, was because I saw it. I saw the hypocrisy and the self-righteousness all the time. Now, funnily enough, the religion is about self-righteousness and hypocrisy and calling that out. So realistically, I should have understood that. But yeah, man, I think that if there is a God, and if there is a hell, a shitload of currently serving conservative Christians in our halls of government, they will either be burning in hell or spending endless amounts of time in purgatory for how much they cloak themselves in religion while not understanding shit about it, and also lying through their teeth as easily as they breathe. Seriously, like if there is a God and if there's judgment, a substantive amount of current conservative Christian Congress members will either burn in hell or be in purgatory, because they are some of the most self-righteous, hypocritical, lying sacks of shit vipers I've ever seen. It's beyond comedy.
Relationship
No,
to God.
it refers it to the 10th Amendment.
I'm gonna get some water. I'll be right back.
Have you heard of the 10th Amendment?
And they had a better
The First Amendment forbids a religious test.
All right, let Isabel finish her point, then I'll come to the others.
In fact, the book of Deuteronomy is the most quoted book in America's founding documents by leaps and bounds, more than any secular text. So the very foundation of the United States of America was indeed to be one nation under God, a Christian nation.
But the founding fathers also wanted to have a separate. Hang on. The founding fathers also wanted to have a clear separation between church and state for the United States, didn't they?
And
well, not really. They
okay, well, that's interesting. So, Andrew, am I not right in assuming that, Andrew?
You're not right in assuming that. They didn't want an establishment clause at the federal level for a national religion. States were allowed to have their own religions, and they did. They did have their own religions. She's absolutely right. You couldn't vote in many of the states unless you declared that you were part of the faithful. Like, this is just all revisionist history. We have the 10th Amendment, which says that if these powers are not given to the United States government, they go to the prospective states. The states had their own religious institutions. Mr. Viper over here is a complete liar. Always has been. And his book, he's full of it.
The concept of the separation of church and state in our founding documents.
Same name Jesus said.
It's not hard to say, Andrew. It's not very Christian. It's not very Christian to keep hurling personal insults at another person on the panel, is it?
Well, then take it up with Jesus. He called guys like this.
I don't remember Jesus saying, "Thou shalt go out and call everyone you don't like a doofus."
Vipers.
He did. He called them vipers all the time. I don't know what to tell you. He did.
He called conservative religious authorities those words.
The people who are trying to utilize rigorism against Christians, it would be exactly who Christ would call vipers.
I'm using Jesus against hypocrites.
All right, let me ask John. All right, John, hang on. Don't all talk at the same time, please. John, let me ask you this. You believe that Christian nationalism is against the American Constitution. Why?
Because the founders were very specific about not wanting to have an official state religion. Our official religion is all and or none. The problem is the movement of Christian nationalism is as against the Bill of Rights as they are against the actual teachings of Jesus, which is why you will never see our right-wing friends fighting to put any Jesus quotes on any buildings. Jesus never mentions abortion.
Exactly.
God asserts that a fetus is property in Exodus 21, that a woman's life has more value in his eye. God gives abortion tips for pregnant, unfaithful wives in Numbers chapter 5. That's why abortion's not banned in Jesus's religion. And that's why God and Jesus and Moses and Paul and the prophets never once condemn ending pregnancies or say what the penalty for ending a pregnancy should be. Am I saying Jesus was pro-abortion? No. What I'm saying is for 45 years in my country, Piers, right-wing Christians have been groomed to prioritize something Christ never talked about and then vote against all the things he actually commanded. Jesus was against the death penalty more than once, not a fan of killing the sinner, never mentioned abortion, and yet you can't run for office as a Republican unless you want to criminalize abortion, have the government force citizens to be pregnant against their will, pretend that comes from Jesus, and also think Jesus was wrong about not executing people.
Isabel, I get the feeling you don't entirely agree.
No, not one iota of me agrees with that statement, Piers, and nor should any
Where does the Bible ban it?
In scripture. It starts with a very simple commandment in the 10 Commandments: thou shalt not murder. Let's take off our Catholic hats for a
Judaism
second
does not consider a fetus to be a full life. Abortions are legal and free in Israel right now.
In biomedical sciences, and science is unequivocally clear that human life begins at conception. There is a genetically unique individual
The Bible
who has
disagrees.
never before and will never exist again that is a living organism. And if that species is in fact a human being, which it is, it should be required that we give that person the same dignity, respect, and human rights of any other person on earth. This is this toxic empathy twisting concept of the American church that has been hijacked by left-wing politics, where you can look at a human being waving at you on an ultrasound, just like my daughter did at 11 weeks old, where I could count every single bone in her hand.
As did my son.
Tell you that the death penalty should be outlawed from society because human beings should have rights
Jesus
and dignity.
said that.
Also look at a baby and tell you that that child is worthy of literal human sacrifice. It is disgusting to me.
Okay, and
Fashion 40 says, Cooley embarrassed me as a black man who went through worse shit. He was fucking pathetic. Well, truth be told, I did start the dick measuring contest, but that's because he was making all these broad claims about what he would and wouldn't do. And can I show you something really funny? I'm going to show you guys something really funny as kind of like a brief aside, all right? So what was so funny about the Cooley debate is that Cooley was like,
Andrew,
you should Google me. You should Google me, when he was talking about like how hardcore he was. And what's his name? What is it? The No Fugazi podcast? David Cooley, all right? So I take a look at David Cooley. He's undeniably a good-looking man. He looks tall in this picture. I think he's 6'4", and he's muscular. So good for him. So I'm happy that he worked out. I'm happy. I should work out today. And then he looks tall, right? Okay. But I think it says he's got a bunch of TikToks. Good for him. And then what is a Fugazi? Okay. Fugazi definition. What's a Fugazi? Is a slang term meaning fake, not genuine, or damaged beyond repair. So when I Google this guy whose name is not fake, and he's like, I got so many kids, bro. I got so many kids. So he didn't say how many kids he has, but I'm pretty sure that he's with this chick. They're not married. I think she's a single mom, and I think 3 of the kids are not his. So like, I'm happy, good for him. I'm happy he has a kid. I hope he loves his lady. That's cool. But he's out here talking about like red pill and you got to do this and you got to do that in order to be a man and blah, 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 blah. But like 90%. Oh, and then this is the other thing that he's tall. I'm as tall as this dude. Okay. If this guy's 6'4", I'm the same fucking height. So him being like, you need to Google me. It's like, what am I supposed to be learning here? You're tall. You're relatively in shape. You're dating a single mom. You have 1 kid that's biologically yours, and maybe you have other kids who are not biologically yours. And good for you, by the way. Like good for you for, raising somebody else's kids. David Cooley, No Fugazi podcast. And then he played basketball when he was in college. Okay, cool. Good for you, bro. Like what the fuck was I supposed to be like? If he was like a multimillionaire or a billionaire or a former NFL player or a former NBA player, or if he had like a PhD in sociology or something, like maybe I would be more impressed. But when you're like, hey, Google me, bro, and I see a bunch of you in a broken family that you married into, and God bless you, by the way. I'm not talking too much shit about that. But when you're emanating from the red pill sphere and you're talking about how women have failed in their duties, like what the fuck? What the fuck am I supposed to learn from this? And sorry, just to address you specifically, Fashion 40, he's like, oh, you were a supply guy? That means you didn't see shit. You didn't do shit. Number 1, I did do some cool shit in the Marine Corps. Number 2, that ignores the fact that I was in law enforcement for 4 fucking years. So if he wanted to be like, I was raised in the ghetto, I saw somebody get killed when I was 10 years old, I saw crackheads when I was 8 years old, I was seeing people who were homeless and destitute and filled with drugs and sin, and they were dying, so my life is way more hardcore than your life. It's like, that would have been true if I turned 18 and didn't do shit with my life. But not only did I join the Marine Corps and have a bunch of crazy formative experiences, I also did 4 years in law enforcement and had a bunch of crazy formative experiences. So that whole, I was raised in the ghetto, you don't know what it's like, man. Like, sorry, bro. Try that on another white person, because that doesn't work on me. Fucking Cooley.
And I'm just saying that the Bible never bans it. Jesus bans the death penalty. This is a movement that doesn't fight for the stuff Jesus talks about. They fight for the stuff conservative Christians prioritize.
I mean,
okay, let me bring
Jesus bans executions. Yes.
Let me bring Andrew in here. Andrew.
Yeah. So the thing is funny is like he keeps on citing Israel as though that has not become a much more secular nation. There are Orthodox Jews who fight over abortion all the time.
He also cited scripture, bro.
Religion.
All the time, Orthodox Jews fight over abortion because of the idea of ensoulment, sir. And what does your Catholic dogma say about ensoulment? What does it say? Your Catholic dogma, you, the self-described Catholic, what does your dogma say about the ensoulment of a fetus? Can you tell me?
I was raised Catholic, sir, but my church is against the teachings of Christ on many areas.
Answer my question. What is the dogma? What is the dogma of the Catholic Church, which you described yourself as
Catholic
a quote,
Church
progressive
says,
Catholic?
The Catholic Church says conception. The Bible says first breath. My point here is that the Bible does not ban it.
Catholic who
Y'all have
believe in your dogma.
prioritized something the Bible never forbids, and you vote and legislate against the stuff Christ actually talked about.
So let me get this right. You're a progressive. You're a progressive Catholic that doesn't believe in your own dogma.
Andrew,
is that right? You don't believe in your own dogma?
I don't really know if the Pope would consider me a Catholic anymore. No, I think the church is wrong about a lot of things, Andrew. Some of us go beyond
progressive Catholic.
Because that's how I was raised. Let me ask you a question.
Catholic.
Andrew.
Because you were trying to give credibility to a Democrat. That's why.
Andrew, does God knowingly ensoul fetuses that he knows are going to be aborted?
According to Catholic dogma, yes.
People. Jeremiah,
so God puts a soul in a baby that he knows is going to be. So God puts a soul in a baby that he knows will be aborted.
Do you realize that by your logic, you would be denying the omnipotence of God, that God does not know that you're going to die before you die? Do you believe that? You just said Jesus Christ is God.
I'm not denying that at all. I'm asking you, does God put a soul? Does God put a soul in a fetus that he knows is going to be aborted?
Hang on. I want to ask John a question, just to round things off here, because we mentioned Charlie Kirk a lot. I watched a lot of the Charlie Kirk service, and I found a lot of it profoundly moving, I have to say. Not least of all, the crowd themselves. I did not get the feeling I was at some, full-on political rally. Trump did what Trump does, and he obviously made some of it political. But actually,
Patriarch, thank you for the membership. Make her face an emote. We probably should, but I don't want you guys to use it the wrong way.
most of the speakers, as I think Isabel said, really talked up other things that Charlie Kirk stood for. But the overriding feeling I got was of a religious ceremony here, paying tribute to somebody who, at the forefront of everything he stood for, was his Christian faith. And the one thing I can absolutely guarantee as a consequence of the
Beef Supreme renewed their membership. Does anyone else here think Andrew has a very subpar pipe game? Like, I wouldn't be surprised if Andrew thinks the female orgasm is a myth. Listen. This is free advice, and I find that vulgar and disrespectful to Mr. and Mrs. Crucible. All right? Vulgar and disrespectful. However, if your pipe game is weak, work on the other aspects of your game. That's my advice to young people.
Brutal murder of Charlie Kirk is that I think there will be a definite increase in the number of young people identifying as Christians, and they will probably identify as Christian conservatives. I mean, that, John, I think is almost an inevitable consequence of what happened. What do you think?
I hope.
Simon Simple says, both the other thing, if Destiny is always good faith, I'll take your word. He's not always good faith. Don't mistake what I said. So what I'm saying is Stephen oftentimes, not all the time, sometimes he can be a douche, but he oftentimes reflects the energy that he gets back. So if you call in, let's say that you email him and you say, hey, I want to debate or talk about this topic. And he says, yeah, sure, that sounds cool. Let's do it. And then he gives you a date and a time and you show up. What oftentimes happens is if you start the conversation with Destiny, you're a piece of shit and you're a bad dad and you're a sexual degenerate and you suck and this is why your argument sucks, then he's going to start making fun of you and bantering and being a piece of shit and being an asshole. That's what's going to happen. However, if you come to Destiny and you're like, hey, I'm a conservative or I'm a libertarian or I'm this or I'm that, and I understand that your conversations can get spicy, but I seriously want you to consider X, Y, Z, A, B, C, and I want to have a real conversation about it. Then oftentimes Destiny will check his own tempo. Now, that being said, if he viciously disagrees on something, then he can get quite spicy pretty quick. But he will typically at that point check his own tempo and he will try to have a good faith conversation. So if you go bad faith, he's happy to go bad faith. That's the best content. If you ask for good faith, he will typically extend good faith. That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying Destiny is good faith all the time. He can be quite spicy. And then not only can he be quite spicy, one of the things that I think I'm a recent critic of Steven on is the fact that when it comes to MAGA in particular, he thinks they're so poorly behaved that he engages in logical fallacies like whataboutism as long as it's advantageous in the conversation. And that's one of the things that's frustrating for me is that Steven spent so much time in his digital media career, especially between 2016 and 2022, I would say, enlightening his audience on logical fallacies, poor argumentation, how you can take a spicy topic and even if you have a terrible take, you can still argue it well. He did such a good job informing his audience on what's good and bad rhetoric that now when he engages in bad rhetoric, it's hard not to be like, why the fuck are you doing that? Like, you know, it's a bad tactic. You know, it's bad rhetoric. You know, it's not logically consistent. And yet you engage in it just because you want to dunk in the conversation. And so I think that that argumentation, at least to me, like somebody who's probably watched Steven since 2020, but when I started watching Steven in 2020, I went back and I watched some of his older debates, like the Sargon debate, the Lauren Southern debate, the N-word debate. I'm trying to think of what else, but I checked out some of his classic shit, the Mike from PA debates. He got me so used to understanding logical fallacies and pointing them out in an argument that now when he engages in them, I get genuinely frustrated. Genuinely frustrated.
I don't care what they call themselves. I wish Christians would follow, believe in, and fight for the things Jesus actually talked about, as opposed to the things conservative Christians have been groomed to fight for and prioritize, which often have nothing to do with the teachings of Christ. There is no Jesus-based defense of Donald Trump support. You look at immigration alone, you have to reject God of the entire Old Testament, who commanded us to treat the alien as one of our own. You have to reject Jesus, who said that you have to who said that the way you treat the immigrant is the way you treat him. I need someone to explain to me why Donald Trump's right and God and Jesus are wrong. I don't care how people identify.
Okay,
I love many conservative Christians, and I'm not talking about the conservatives. I'm talking about the right wingers.
All right, hang on, Andrew,
it's the same
explain
exact
that.
logic. Yeah, it's the same exact logic that he used when he was raising money for Kamala Harris, who said we have to have secure borders, told Guatemalans can't come into the nation, and said, quote, I did this now as justification because otherwise I would look like a hypocrite, because she was the lesser of two evils. We can use the exact same argument.
Yeah.
The exact same argument. It's the lesser of two evils to have a wide open border where human trafficking can occur.
No one called.
Beef Supreme says, Cotter, I'm making something for you. I made you some grill hottest stickers. I need to get in touch with you. DM me on Discord, bro. I'll get you some snail mail contact info.
For a wide open border. No one called for that. You're bearing false witness.
You did. You said the religious refugees. We should look at them as religious refugees and just be totally
Jesus
accepting.
Calls for an open border.
That's
yes.
what you said
Jesus
we should
called
do
for
and
an
how
open
Christians
border.
should behave.
God
this
called
is why
for
we
an
can't
open
listen
border.
to you.
And Ronald Reagan called for an open border and amnesty.
To you because, sir, you're a hypocrite.
I like that this guy is confident enough. Like, and by the way, I think his gun control shit is cringe. I think that some of his argumentation is obviously not going to work with his target audience. Let's be real. It's probably atheists and progressive Christians who are actually scriptural or are looking for scriptural justification for why they're progressive. And so he's probably killing it with that audience, not going to lie. But when it comes to like convincing evangelicals that he's correct and they're wrong, I think he's probably not the most effective. But I do like this like unflappable, grin. I can turn the other cheek. I'm not worried about it. I have a command of the topic. Therefore, I'm going to present my facts, and I'm not going to freak out if you don't acknowledge them. This is actually like quite a refreshing way to argue. I genuinely, I think I've gone into the Spurgouts myself quite a bit. Seeing a confident, competent adult talk in a confident adult way, even if I disagree with him, is refreshing. It's been refreshing.
Hypocrite.
I haven't
the very thing you accuse us
No,
of.
I'm not.
You yourself did.
Why is
you
Jesus wrong about the
for
border,
Kamala
Andrew?
Harris, who had the same,
Why
who
is
had the same
Jesus
crackdown
wrong?
border policies?
Dude, she was going to hurt less people, and it's been.
Yeah, Doobie says that Destiny versus Demon Mama debate was from the golden age before the dark times. Agreed.
Proven, by the way.
No,
There's
she would have
several
hurt
thousand
more
folks
people with
overseas
human
that
trafficking.
would be alive if USA.
Hang on.
Hang on.
She would have hurt
The
more
thing about the
people with
border,
human
which makes
trafficking.
the thing about the border debate, which makes me laugh. Today, 2 clips have gone viral on X, and it's of Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton both talking about the southern border. In
1 second. This is happening. 133 watching, 49 likes. Bad chat, please fix. True. Like the stream. Share it with your friends. Engage with chat. Super chats if you got them. Memberships if you got them. Parasocially love you. Thank you for being here. I hope you're having a good time.
a way that today, the woke left would describe as speaking in a fascist way about illegal immigrants. And that just shows me there's a
The
lot
left
of
called
hypocrisy.
them that back in the 90s, Piers.
A lot of hypocrisy on all sides, but
back in the 90s.
it certainly used to be the norm for Democrat leaders to talk in a way that they now pretend is talking like a fascist, which doesn't reflect...
And Ronald Reagan called for amnesty and open borders, Piers. It's gone back and
Ronald
forth on
Reagan
both sides
also
over the
said a
years.
country without a strong border is not a country.
He didn't call for open borders.
But Ronald
what are you
Reagan
talking about?
He did call for
That's
open borders.
amnesty
Ronald
is
Reagan's
not
argument
open
was, let him
borders.
come
No, he
over here
didn't.
and work.
He didn't.
Reagan
call for
also
open-
said if there's open borders,
What?
Piers, you're listening. Your viewers can Google this. Reagan
They're using open borders in different ways. So what open borders means to me, and I think it means to Andrew Wilson and probably Piers Morgan, is that you just don't have an enforced border. Anybody can travel back and forth. I think what this guy is using it as is he's saying like we should have a open immigration policy. So I think I think they're using the same word differently.
said when they're done working here, they can go back home.
John, Reagan literally said,
That's not
if a
open
country
borders,
doesn't have a
dude.
strong border, it's not a country, right?
Yes.
That is not
Reagan
open
used the
borders.
term, and Reagan gave amnesty to millions. My question is, why is Donald Trump right and God and Jesus are wrong?
Well, if you
Why
ask
was
Trump, it's
Kamala?
Nice.
because-
Why is Kamala right and God and Jesus are wrong?
No,
Why?
you're not answering the
He's never argued that. If anything, he's argued the opposite. That's pretty funny.
question, Andrew.
I'll
Why
answer-
are God
listen,
and
I'm gonna
Jesus
use the
wrong on
same
abortion?
logic. First of all,
I'm not a Democrat,
abortion
bro.
is
It's not going to
very-
hurt me.
Abortion is very, very clearly outlined in both Catholic Church and Orthodox
All right, let's
Church
not get
as
back into
being
that.
murder.
Let's not
Sorry,
get back into
bad news for you.
We've done the abortion debate. I want to end, Isabel, by asking you, when you saw Erica Kirk and her address at her husband's memorial, I mean, I got a sense of somebody feeling a very, very strong conviction to take over from him.
But Gen X says, bro, Destiny understands God and scripture better than them. So does my other favorite small streamer who is atheist. Sure. And when Steven actually speaks highly of his Jesuit instructors at whatever school that he went to, and he steelmans religious belief, I think that he can actually be quite insightful. But when I talked to him, it was something in reference to like gooning or sex stuff or something like that. And I was saying something to the effect of, well, like there's sin and consequence. And he's like, well, I don't believe in an afterlife, so fuck all that shit. I find that to be like middle school, high school, edgy anti-theist. I'm mad at my mom and dad and I want to smoke pot and finger bang people. That's the vibe. The vibe is that you're still 14 and you're mad at mom and dad and you want to do hand stuff and smoke weed. That's what it feels like.
And becoming
So I think Steven's better than that argumentatively. I think he could be better than that argumentatively, but I think ultimately he just wants to tell people to fuck off and he wants to do hand stuff and smoke weed.
Almost immediately, an incredibly powerful advocate, actually, for the Christian conservative right.
I think you're exactly right, Piers. You know, many people are saying that perhaps no one influenced the culture of young men over the past decade as much as Charlie Kirk. I wholeheartedly agree with that. In returning to traditional masculinity and embracing objective truth and submitting to God in a culture telling you that your faith is oppressive in some way. Now there's this new frontier in the culture war conversation with young women where the angry leftist
AK Batasui says, let's remember scientists have replicated a handful of the steps that would have happened in sequence in order to demonstrate abiogenesis. A handful of steps gets us closer to abiogenesis, but we're not there yet. Sure, but this is paint time, talking about the creation of the universe, lol. Okay, so sorry, this is just actually like wildly important. So we believe that the universe with our current understanding began with the Big Bang, okay? And then at some point, there was a singularity where all matter that's currently within our galaxy and currently within the universe was concentrated in a single point. That's a singularity, which, by the way, I would argue is the alpha in the God Alpha Omega scriptural analysis, okay? So I am the Alpha and the Omega. I am the beginning and the end. Also, while a lot of people believed that the Big Rip, where matter just gets sucked out into the galaxy endlessly, there's actually an argument, I think a recent cosmological argument involving black holes, where they've actually said that they believe that we're going to end in a big crunch. So that there's like 2 or 3 cosmological models. And I think the big crunch is actually really interesting because it makes an argument for a cyclical universe. Okay. So we start as a singularity, we expand into the current material universe, and then we crunch and we become a singularity again. That unironically, I would just believe, while I might not believe that Jesus Christ is the Messiah, this unironically would just confirm that we're like, God was the singularity. He was the singularity of something, okay? And then God was floating in the void of space, and he got fucking bored. And he was like, you know what? I want to experience shit. I just don't want to float out here eternally. Therefore, I'm going to commit suicide. And then what God did is he blew himself up into stardust, and that stardust swirled, and it became suns and planetoids and stars and galaxies and all that bullshit. And then somewhere around here, life emerged. Okay. And then it complexified and evolved to the point that it became human. Right. And so the point is, when we're talking about like abiogenesis, in order to not believe in abiogenesis, then effectively what you would have to believe is that life, as we understand it or don't understand it, existed to some degree in the singularity. And then as we spread out and became stardust and became, you know, stars and planets and all that kind of stuff, life was nested necessarily. Life was not only real and understandable, life was possible within the singularity. And then not only that, it was seeded into the universe, eventually complexifying and becoming human. That's what you would have to believe. But my understanding is that life as we understand it, like a biological organism, not only can't exist within the vacuum of space, but it can't really exist in the stardust, in stars and protoplanets of the universe. And therefore, life wouldn't be seeded on a biological level where you had some virus or bacteria that was capable of surviving in a black hole or a singularity. I don't think that is currently possible based off of our understanding of the cosmos. But I think that what's more likely is that life is kind of seeded into the dead and dormant material of the entire galaxy and universe. And therefore, when life is in the right conditions, like it's in the Goldilocks zone of a specific kind of planet within a specific frame of the universe, then life emanates abiogenetically. That would be my logical belief. Now, if there's a different theory that explains this shit, some people say it's like panspermia, right? Or panspecemia or some shit like that, where the stardust had life inside it, and then the life shot out to a planet and then became more dominant. But what you're not answering here, which is why I find like aliens created human beings and that's how we came to exist. What's so fucking stupid about that sci-fi trope is something had to create the aliens too. So saying that aliens created humans doesn't solve the problem of life or existence. It just pushes the needle back a little bit. And so it's the same thing here, where if you say, well, there was a speck of stardust that had life on it, and then that speck of stardust interacted with a planetoid, which is what caused human life, then you're just asking the question right here, where did this life come from? Which makes no fucking sense. So anyways, I hope that the universe is cyclical. I hope that I'm having this conversation again with you guys. Like, I think the universe is 14 billion years old. Either that or Earth is 14 billion years old. I always mix it up. But if the universe is 14 billion years old, I hope that I am talking to you guys again 28 billion years from now. I hope that the universe is cyclical and iterative, where, yeah, like different shit happens through different cycles, but ultimately we repeat our lives over and over and over again so we can live them slightly differently and slightly better over time. That's what I'm not saying that's real. I'm saying that's my hope. So, life, universe, cyclical. I would put a question mark there, but I can't.
Feminist rhetoric that has just destroyed women's happiness over my lifetime in America is starting to lose its shackle on young women. I think Erica Kirk is really becoming a powerful voice.
Gen X for $10. Thank you for the super chat. Sorry, I'm a civil servant and not rich like Grassroots Hegemon or Doobie. No problem. My parasocially love you anyways. Like the stream, share it with your friends, engage with chat, super chats if you got them, memberships if you got them. Thank you for being here.
For godliness, for morality, for forgiving of your enemies, for embracing a soft femininity. I'm incredibly excited to see her in this new role at Turning Point USA. And
I have to just end by saying that as an Irish Catholic myself, it was very noticeable to me that whether you're on the American Christian right or the American Christian left, in the end, actually God decided it would be an Irishman that would win the Ryder Cup. So there you go. And there's nothing that any of you guys could do about it.
Glad he's weighing in on something.
Nothing
Glad
you can do
weighing in
about
on
it.
something. Yeah.
The prayers of the Europeans were answered in glorious fashion, and maybe that is how we should end things. Thank you all very much. I appreciate it.
All right. Well, thanks for the entertainment, Pierce. I appreciate it. What I would say is that I have asked Andrew Wilson for a couple of debates. He has declined politely both times. I don't know if he's not interested in the topics or not interested in me particularly, but I don't like chasing after people for conversations or debates. I think that we made some good content in the past, but I also think that maybe he's gotten too big for his britches, where he doesn't want to talk to Twitch pull shitters unless it's advantageous to him. Unless he thinks that he can get a fat dunk, then he doesn't want to do it. That would be my suspicion. I don't have any evidence for my suspicion, but that's my suspicion. And so I'm happy to debate Andrew Wilson about woke right. I'm happy to debate him about Christian nationalism. I'm happy to debate him about a variety of topics. And if he does this bullshit where he doesn't let the other person get out any ideas, I'll be happy to call him out on it in real time and say, hey, man, I let you talk for 2 to 3 minutes. Let me talk for a little bit. I did think that this guy, whatever his name was, he was hysterical. I thought he was fantastic. I think he had the perfect energy. So Andrew Wilson, church and hate author John Fugelsang, and the Daily Wire's Isabel Brown. Isabel Brown getting mogged by John Fugelsang was based. John Fugelsang, I disagree with a substantive amount of what was said, but I think he participated in the debate in good cheer, and I think it was actually quite funny. So good for him. Now, I'm actually going to scroll to the bottom real quick. I'm going to leave my click, but what do you guys want to do? Let me pull this up. So Lonerbox covered Dave Smith versus Coleman Hughes. I like Lonerbox, so I wouldn't mind not watching Dave Smith versus Coleman Hughes, but actually watching Lonerbox's coverage of Dave Smith and Coleman Hughes. That way I could critique the critique. I would be interested in that. The other one is Ross Douthat versus Hassan Piker. Those are the two pieces of content. I'm also open to suggestions from chat on what on other content that might be popping. But Ross Douthat versus Hassan Piker, the only reason why I'm reticent or hesitant to do it, it's not because I couldn't cover it or get into the details or make some cool drawings. It's just that Hassan Piker is such a fucking midwit that I find all his observations frustratingly vapid. And so it's not a question of whether or not I would enjoy the criticism. It's just that he's so fucking boring and he's so shallow that I borderline hate him. So let me scroll up a little bit. I talk to Andrew pretty often. I can ask him for you. It's not that big of a deal, Doobie. And honestly, like, I'll admit it. I might be a little bit butthurt just because I asked him for like two debates on two different topics and he declined both times. So maybe I'm a little bit ass mad. So I don't want you to be like, hey, Connor's fucking ass mad and he's calling you a pussy for not debating him. I wouldn't do that. Just if it comes up in conversation and he's like, damn, I'm so bored of debating dumb people, then just be like, yeah, well, Connor said that he wanted to debate you on a couple of topics. So why don't you reach out to him? Make it chill, make it casual. Okay. I don't like that. I don't like it when people do the harassment thing where they're like, this person needs to talk to you. Answer them now. Like I don't like that shit. But if it comes up casually, bring it up. So I vote for Loner. Rob says the aliens theory is just to show that data of life on Earth can be explained by metaphysically less complex theory. Given we don't know, there must be a singular start at all. Well, I mean, I think there probably is a singular start, though. There has to be at one point where dead material became living material. There has to be something like that. Watch Jim Jordan squirm like a worm. In what content? Because I've seen Jim Jordan squirm like a worm over the past 48 hours where people have called him out on like, hey, you guys are saying that the FBI was spying on people, but wasn't the FBI spying on people because of January 6th? And I saw a clip of that where he was squirming like a worm. I watched another one where a Democratic representative was like, hey, Jim Jordan, you know Trump's a piece of shit and he's fucking ruining everything and he's a fucking asshole. And Jim Jordan's like, lol. Like he just... Kay says Loner covering Coleman and Dave was but like 6 hours long. Yeah, but you know what I do? I take content that's 6 hours long and I just covered like 30 to 45 minutes of it. Now, the shitty thing about that is sometimes I miss the spiciest elements of the content because I only get to 30 to 45 minutes of it for a 2 hour breakdown. But at the same time, like at least we get to touch on the topic, in my opinion. Sacred Snow says he cut it down to an hour and a half based. Screaming Sturmovic says I hate boring people more than sexual predators. Screaming Sturmovich. That Lonerbox isn't a sexual predator. I don't know who you're talking about. But anyways, I'm assuming that's a barbed jab towards Destiny. Yeah, Predator's doing a lot of heavy lifting there. That's pretty funny. But yeah, no, I genuinely hate Hassan Piker more than I hate Destiny. Absolutely. I think Hassan Piker is a terror apologist. I think he's a fucking piece of shit. I think that you could bring up some sex shit that Hassan's done that's pretty gross and bad. And yeah. So it's funny that you say that. I'll just go ahead and entertain it just for the sake of the shit post. But everybody's accusing Steven of being a fucking sex predator piece of shit because he took consensually made homemade pornographic videos and he shared it with a woman that he thought was 18 but ended up being 17 and a half, allegedly, right? And so Steven's like this huge like sex predator monster piece of shit. You understand that Hassan Piker was accused by Lav of having sex with Paris Jackson when she was 17, right? Now, he was allegedly 24. So the age gap would be 4, 6, 7 years. The age gap between Paris Jackson and Hassan Piker would have been 7 years versus Stevens allegedly being middle 30s, talking to what he thought was an 18-year-old, but ended up being a 17-and-a-half-year-old. But you understand that, like, having sex with a 17-and-a-half-year-old is probably worse than thinking that they're 18 or 19 and exchanging sexy messages. I think that would probably be logically true. Now, my argument is just don't do that shit at all. Fuck around until you're 25, date, have fun, and then once you hit 25, get bored, go have kids, find the person you love, and love them for the rest of your life. That's my advice. Whether or not people can actually execute that is a different question, but I think that's the ideal. Fitzimo says, Andrew dipped out on a drama stream with Owen Benjamin. That sucks. Hans Mayer says Hassan is as unwatchable as Trump. Yeah, he's kind of fucking boring. Beef Supreme says, Connor skipped past the male thongs conversation. I did. Asay Garcia for $2 says, drama slap suggestion, Hassan dog abuse situation. Okay. So here's the real. I'll go full screen for this because we had a few people ask that question. Okay. For Hassan dog abuse, all right, an electric shock collar is not the worst kind of dog abuse, okay? Punching your dog, kicking your dog, not feeding your dog, neglecting your dog, that's all the worst kind of shit. But is it fucked up to keep a dog in a single place in your room for 5 to 8 hours of streaming daily? And if they leave a 10-foot by 10-foot space for 8 hours a day, you electroshock them? That's fucking crazy. And I hope he takes a massive amount of shit for it. I really do. I really do. There's 10,000 reasons to hate Hassan Piker. That's just another one. Like, share, subscribe, dislike, participate in chat. Super chat if you got them, memberships if you got them. My parasocial love you. I'll catch you tomorrow. Have a great day. Bye for now.